Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup. We are continuing Case File today, and I am so excited to see what the heck happens next. How is everyone doing? 'Cause yeah, we kinda left on a bit of a cliffhanger. Um, and I'm so glad that the last stream that we left on a cliffhanger was Monday, and then it wasn't today, because I don't know, if it's Wednesday and the stream ends on a cliffhanger, I just go nuts because I have to wait for so long. And I'm so glad we didn't have to wait for so long. Um, so today we're reading chapters 42 through 44. Um, please give the stream a like. And yeah, hi Psykeen. I'm so nervous to find out with this video of Xie Ching Chung that's like the dirt on Xie Ching Chung, like what it's gonna be, because I'm like sitting here like I can't imagine anyone having dirt on him. So it's just like what is apparently gonna make He Yu like hate him so much, or just not even hate him. I guess his feelings are complicated, but he already hated him a little bit, but it's like what is going to make him like decide to stop working with him on this case? That's what I want to know. Hi Nina, hi Henry. Um yeah, so my head is empty. I have no predictions. I have no idea what this could be. So I'm just going to get right into it. We're on page 163 for chapter 42, which is called Tell Me, What is the Truth? What was this video? It seemed to have something to do with Xie Ching Chung. He Yu glanced impassively at the code rapidly scrolling past his phone screen. His opponent would need some time to catch up to him, but it wouldn't take long. It was very possible this video had been sent to him to disrupt his concentration. Closing the chat window, he set the matter aside. He didn't want to get distracted. However, a moment later, a second message jumped out like a lingering spirit that refused to move on. Edward, I know that you suffer from a rare psychological disorder. While you were attacking our firewall, we also looked into your files. He Yu's fingers stilled. Oh, hi, Sua Bang. That's awesome that you caught up. Glad to see a new face in here. Though his condition was a secret, his personal hospital and physician had copies of his medical records. The organization's hacking skills were advanced enough that, with certain clues, it wouldn't be impossible for them to determine his true identity and obtain records within a short amount of time. Immediately thereafter, his opponent sent a third message. That Xie Ching Chung is lying to you and using you. Aren't you curious about why he suddenly stopped being a doctor? Oh, it has to do with that. We're going to find out more about that. Henry, not psychological Ebola. A fourth message. Stop throwing your life away for him. Why don't you take a look at this video? The video pop-up appeared again, chasing him relentlessly like a venomous serpent. He Yu's willpower wasn't that weak, so he still didn't click on it. But the fangs of that venomous serpent had indeed sunken into his flesh, causing him to hesitate for a split second. If his opponent wanted to quickly tear through his mental barriers, they needed to be very cunning with the entry point of their attack. And the information that the other hacker was sending him had indeed been a thorn in his side for a very long time. Why did Xie Ching Chung have to go? He had insisted so stubbornly on leaving. Even after He Yu had set aside his pride and asked him pathetically to stay, all Xie Qingcheng would say was, "Your father is the one paying me. You can't afford to employ me." He Yu would never forget the way he felt back then. In all his life, he had only ever been close to two people. One was Xie Qingcheng, and the other was Xie Shui. But that day, that evening, they both became illusions that may as well have never existed at all. He Yu had tried so hard to live like a normal person, constantly refusing to submit to his inner demons. He had tried for a whole 7 years. At that moment, he had genuinely been crumbling apart inside. But when all was said and done, he had never truly resented Xie Qingcheng. He Yu was used to loneliness, and also to understanding all sorts of people. Sometime later, he did come to understand Xie Qingcheng's choice. After all, what they had was nothing more than a simple doctor-patient relationship, a job that paid for Xie Qingcheng. Since they were neither family nor friends, it was completely within Xie Qingcheng's rights to leave at any time. And before he left, Xie Qingcheng had neither tricked him nor lied to him. He had explained his reasons very clearly. There was no reason for He Yu to resent him. It was true that He Yu couldn't get over Xie Qingcheng's sudden departure. But later on, He Yu had thought to himself that at least this person had come to him and given him clear-cut articles of faith so that he had the courage to properly live on. At least this person had once told him that patients with mental illnesses needed to rebuild their bridges to society and shouldn't be isolated, that he wasn't an abnormality within society. He Yu thought he ought to understand and forgive Xie Qingcheng for that alone. Xie Qingcheng always had a way of winning people over and gaining their understanding. Just like his conversation with Liu Yuzhu just now, He Yu had caught a few snatches of it. Xie Qingcheng had always been a good speaker, and after so many years, he could still convince people with logic and appeal to their hearts. When the thought crossed his mind, He Yu glanced at Liu Yuzhu's expression. He could clearly see that she had been affected. Even if she had sunken too deep into the muck, even if this brief conversation ultimately couldn't hold up against more than a decade of suffering, she was still truly moved. Xie Qingcheng was trying to convince Liu Yuzhu to learn the truth behind his parents' deaths. So then how had Xie Qingcheng acted toward He Yu? Had he really been entirely honest, without hiding anything? He Yu didn't click on the video, but his gaze did wander somewhat. He looked at Xie Qingcheng facing off against Liu Yuzhu. It was precisely during this moment of inattention that his opponent's commands unexpectedly caught up. By the time He Yu realized what had happened, they had already broken through his defensive firewall. Beep, beep, beep. The countdown to detonation resumed, ticking away even faster than before. The enemy technician had sped up the 5-minute timer. There was now only 1 minute and a dozen or so seconds before the bomb would go off. Hey, remember when He Yu's mother was like, she wasn't being very intense about it, but she was asking them to, like, try not to hurt him, wasn't she? Remember that? Because what now? He Yu snapped abruptly back to attention and cursed under his breath. This really wasn't the time to be thinking about such things. He immediately refocused his attention and typed a command to forcibly shut out the distraction of the video. Sweat beaded on his smooth forehead as his almond eyes stared fixedly at the screen. His fingers moved fast enough to leave after images, their movements blurring together. Meanwhile, as Liu Yuzhu watched He Yu, she grew certain that it had to be him. This young man had to be the one using his cell phone to interfere with the organization's signal. In that case, the most important person here wasn't Xie Qingcheng, but rather this young man. She walked toward him, calm and collected, though her eyes were locked on Xie Qingcheng, as though she were still confronting him. She was really following He Yu in her peripheral vision. As she slowly moved closer and closer, she unlocked the safety on the handgun. There were 11 bullets inside. He Yu rapidly typed out a string of commands and hit confirm. There was a flash of red light. Intercepted. The frantic countdown was halted once again. He Yu let out a sigh of relief and looked up. Just as he was about to give Xie Qingcheng an OK sign, his eyelids suddenly twitched. A sixth sense made him feel a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, and he whipped his head around. At that very same moment, Lu Yuju pulled the pistol out from behind her back, pointed it at He Yu, and pulled the trigger. A bullet burst out of the barrel with an ear-splitting bang. The recoil from the gun made Lu Yuju's arm go numb, and she staggered back several steps. Her shot had gone wide and hit a cabinet full of archival materials. The entire front of the cabinet caved in from the impact, a spiderweb of cracks lacing through the glass display window before it shattered violently. He Yu! Xie Qingcheng paled and immediately rushed toward Lu Yuju, tackling her and pinning her to the floor. Even so, Lu Yuju didn't let go of the gun. She struggled and screamed at Xie Qingcheng as they tussled. And although Xie Qingcheng was in danger of being shot at any moment, since his chest was so close to the gun's muzzle, he didn't let go either. "Move aside," Lu Yuju yelled, her hair disheveled, eyes bulging from anger. She pointed the black muzzle straight at Xie Qingcheng's chest, but for some reason she didn't shoot. "Or else I'll kill you too." "You can take my life, Lu Yuju, but you can't attack him. You can't attack a child." Xie Qingcheng spoke softly to Lu Yuju amid the chaos, his teeth gritted. Unfortunately, He Yu couldn't hear his words over the sounds of Lu Yuju's shouts. She let out an inhuman howl of fury. Her heart had been released from its inhibitions. The first shot had killed any remaining hesitation and compassion. Whatever reason and warmth she had once possessed now began to fade quickly. Gradually, she lost sight of the tear-filled eyes of the mother in the sky. After all, she was a woman who had been abandoned by her child. She had been abandoned. Scenes from the past flashed before her eyes. The support from the county's residents, the happiness when she took office. Lu Yuju is amazing. She's the first female graduate student in our county. She graduated from a top university and came back to be the county secretary. The first woman secretary at that. So impressive. Make sure you do great things for our county. Secretary Lu, thank you for helping repair the roads in our village and building Hope Elementary School. After stalling for so many years, they just weren't willing to do it. Secretary Lu, thank you. If it wasn't for you, my mother would have forced me to get married. I still want to study. Thank you for helping me, and for allowing me to continue my studies. Thank you, really. Thank you. Secretary Lu, why don't you accept our thank you gifts? So many secretaries have come and gone, but none of them were like you, taking us villagers seriously and helping us with so much. Thank you. Thank you. Suddenly, like thunder from a clear sky, she plummeted from high up in the clouds into the abyss. Lu Yuju, someone reported you. Someone reported you for embezzlement and bribery. Please come with us to the police station. Oh, and there's art, by the way. I can't lie and act like she doesn't look like a badass in this. Unfortunately for the current situation. Yuju. Mama, Mama. There seemed to be a blubbering child at the bottom of the abyss, bawling indistinctly. That child reached out to her and stared at her with tears in her eyes. Mama, she cried incessantly. When she returned years later, the girl who had once reached out to her now stood timidly behind another woman, afraid to approach her. Who are you? Who are you? Who am I? Lu Yuju wondered. In a filthy hotel dishwashing room, amid piles of dirty tablecloths and tableware. Lu Yuju, faster. Aren't you from the countryside? It's just a little bit of work. How are you so slow? You know, she was a graduate student. Eh? A graduate student doing dishes? I think she studied something pretty trendy. Computer information security? How weird. What happened to her? Lu Yuju, Human Resources reviewed your file again. You're an ex-convict. You can't hide such a thing when applying for a job. You should leave. I'll settle your salary for this month, but you don't have to come to work tomorrow. In the musky massage room, between the inappropriately familiar men's faces, this little beauty actually seems kind of embarrassed. Putting on airs? Whore, aren't you just selling yourself? Saying so much nonsense even though I've already given you money? The fact that I've taken a liking to you is already a sign of respect. You dare to bite me? A slap to the face, then another. Loud, silent, corporeal, intangible, from the darkness, from every direction. Slap after slap struck her across the face. Kneeling, she cried as she clawed at the ground until her hands were covered in blood, as though she wanted to dig up a bit of light and truth to show them. Yes, she had done something wrong. She had done something wrong. She had accepted money, but it was only enough money to buy a pig, an unwritten rule in the village, and she didn't even accept it personally. She didn't even know. Why did she have to be reduced to this? Her family torn asunder, all alone with nowhere to go. Why? She couldn't defend herself even if she had 100 mouths. Everything was blotted out by a judgment she couldn't escape. She hoped to find someone she could trust, who could bring her hope. She waited and waited until her heart had shriveled, but all that arrived was one disappointment after another. My surname is Duan. Your name is Lu Yuju, right? You have a graduate degree. Suddenly, there was a spark. It was the flare of a customer's lighter. The man was just here to relieve his boredom, to see something new, playing around with some good-for-nothing friends. He had no intention of actually slaking his desires, and no interest in the women in these cheap establishments. He found her interesting, so amid those specks of light, he slowly exhaled a breath of smoke from his cigarette. You studied so much. He tossed the lighter onto the tea table and looked at her. Why are you doing this kind of work? Lu Yuju didn't respond. Maybe it was because the man's gaze was too calm, without any trace of disdain. She could even say that it was focused and earnest, genuinely interested in understanding her. At that moment, a heavy blow suddenly struck the crumbling walls of Lu Yuju's heart. She endured it for a few seconds, or perhaps a dozen, but in the end, she couldn't bear it anymore. Falling to her knees, she covered her face and began sobbing bitterly, right in front of that customer. It was as though her sobbing and despair from days past materialized once again as Lu Yuju snarled at Xie Qingcheng. Don't try to stop me from protecting him. It was truly frightening what a person could do when they were cornered. Who knew where she found the strength, but she managed to push back against Xie Qingcheng holding her arm down and turn toward He Yu, who was standing off to the side. He Yu hadn't run. On the contrary, when he realized that Xie Qingcheng was in danger, he came forward to help his companion. In the past, Lu Yuju probably would have admired a young man like this, but now she didn't hesitate. She strained to lift her wrist, twisting her hand. With great effort, she gripped the gun and aimed it at He Yu and pulled the trigger. An ear-splitting bang rang out. Her first shot missed. Lu Yuju's eyes were already red with bloodlust. Her expression shattered. The veins on her forehead popped violently as she bared her teeth, looking less like a human than a captive beast. Xie Qingcheng shoved her back to the ground, yet she refused to let go of the gun, spraying bullets in He Yu's direction as if she had gone mad. Bang, 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 bang. Ignoring his own safety, Xie Qingcheng still refused to let go despite being so close to the onslaught. But when Lu Yuju exploded with the strength of someone making their last stand, it was impossible for Xie Qingcheng to wrest away her gun so quickly under such chaotic circumstances. Lu Yuju didn't waste a single bullet on Xie Qingcheng. She kept firing at He Yu, the man who was preventing her from blowing up the archives. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, there was a dull thud. Xie Qingcheng's eyes went wide as he whipped around, his pupils contracting. He Yu. In the end, the young man was still wounded, because he refused to leave, because he still hadn't abandoned Xie Qingcheng and fled. He had been hit. Clutching his shoulder, He Yu leaned heavily against the wall. He was wearing all black, so the blood pouring from his wound wasn't very obvious at first. As the fresh, red blood seeped into the black material of his clothes, it didn't look so bright under the dim lights. But when he placed a hand over the gunshot wound, pressing his cold, pale fingers to it, his hand came away dyed by gush after gush of blood. Crimson oozed over his pallid skin, creating an immediately ghastly sight. It was as though Xie Qingcheng's vision itself had been dyed scarlet. Seeing that she had struck him, Lu Yuju panted heavily from where she was still pressed against the ground by Xie Qingcheng. Looking at the blood pouring from He Yu's injury, she suddenly tossed her head back and began to laugh. That ear-piercing laugh was mournful and terrifying. Tears began to flow down her cheeks and into her disheveled hair. Her grip loosened, and the gun fell to the ground. Xie Qingcheng jumped to his feet and immediately ran toward He Yu. He Yu tried to pick up his phone again with his injured arm. He wanted to finish keying in his last command. He made 2 attempts, but his hands were shaking too hard, so the phone, its screen already covered in blood, slipped from his grip and clattered to the ground. He Yu, I'm fine. We have to go, Xie Qingcheng. He Yu's eyes were fierce and cold as he stared at Lu Yuju's face. His complexion was deathly pale, sweat dripping from his forehead. His words, however, were addressed to Xie Qingcheng. You won't be able to get anything out of her. She's in too deep. He paused. I know you'll regret missing your chance with this witness, but if we don't leave now, it'll be too late. As if to confirm his words, the other technician quickly broke through his firewall and regained control of the detonator, now that He Yu could no longer keep up with the coding battle. He Yu furrowed his brow. He wasn't all that afraid of injury, and to him, blood was an exceedingly unremarkable thing. What worried him was that his injured hand could no longer grip anything. They'd lost control of the situation. Let's go. 276, 275, 274. The countdown flew by, speeding up once again. Supporting He Yu, Xie Qingcheng turned to look at the woman collapsed amid a web of detonation wires through his bloodshot peach blossom eyes. Lu Yuju was like a moth caught in a spider's web. She occasionally trembled with laughter, but tears streamed down her face. She raised her arm and covered her eyes. The top half of her face was tearful, yet the bottom half was still twisted in maniacal laughter. Xie Qingcheng squeezed his eyes shut. The moment he turned around, he felt as if he was moving in slow motion, as if he was looking away from the ice-cold bodies of his parents from 19 years ago. But there was still one last bullet in Lu Yuju's handgun. As she sobbed and laughed and lost her mind, she heard them as they made to leave. She instinctively picked up the gun she had just discarded and pointed it at them. "Get down," shouted He Yu. Xie Qingchung's full attention was on He Yu's injuries, and his back was fully turned to Lu Yuju. So He Yu was the one who noticed Lu Yuju's movement this time around. Bang! Who knew what He Yu was thinking? Perhaps he wasn't thinking at all, and it was just the instinct of an evil dragon protecting his horde. Here we go with the dragon thing again. He immediately shoved Xie Qingchung down, and that caused the final bullet to strike his already injured arm, just slightly above the first gunshot wound. He Yu's body spasmed in pain and went limp in Xie Qingchung's arms, blood splattering all over as Xie Qingchung looked on. Xie Qingchung's scalp prickled. He was a doctor, but at that moment, he was completely incapable of handling this outpour of blood. Why did you... He Yu didn't make a sound. His dark eyes were fearful as he gazed at his wound, as if he was also thinking, why did I do this? Indeed. Why? The way that they both, do everything to protect each other, and yet they're still, it's not clicking. It's not clicking yet. The timer was still frantically ticking away, so Xie Qingchung couldn't afford to waste any more time. Propping He Yu upright, he grabbed the injured boy and sprinted down the corridor. He Yu's hot blood trickled from his shoulder. As Xie Qingchung kept running, he stopped thinking about what had happened in the past and how he had forfeited this last living witness. Holding He Yu tightly as he ran toward the exit, he said to him, "Everything's going to be fine. I'm getting you out of here. Don't worry. I'm not afraid of these things, Xie Qingchung." He Yu's voice floated up quietly. They made it through the hallway into the main hall, their unsteady footfalls echoing behind them. He Yu was still very calm. "I'm not afraid of death or blood, and I don't care about pain either, remember?" Xie Qingchung didn't know what to say. It was probably because I don't fear death enough that I did that just now. The color began to drain from He Yu's lips. It's fine. But Xie Qingchung cared. He ached. Ached is in italics, by the way. He wrapped his arms tighter around He Yu. Because He Yu had lost so much blood so quickly, his face was already alarmingly pale. He was such a young kid, only 19 years old. A normal kid would still be asking their parents for allowance money, cheerfully playing games, nonchalantly reading books, feeling youthful strength course through them without worries, looking forward to a future of boundless prospects. But what about He Yu? He knew very well that there was only darkness before his eyes. Ahead of him, there were only the 3 long-deceased psychological Ebola patients leering at him, telling him that his entire life would be a long night without a dawn, a dead end with no way out. Hi, there's art, by the way. So there's that. Yeah, Henry, that's a good point. He really is just a kid in certain ways. But still, he gritted his teeth and struggled to crawl toward that future which might still hold some semblance of hope. Childhood, innocence, laughter, carelessness, none of it had anything to do with He Yu. He was only 19. No matter how impressive or capable, in the end, he was still a child. At that moment, Xie Qingchung finally woke from the muddled chaos that the desire to avenge his parents had plunged him into. He finally realized why he'd had the feeling before that something was inappropriate. He shouldn't have dragged He Yu into this. Why did he do such a thing? Who was He Yu to him? It's the question. You're so right, Henry. The Granwan of it all. 3,799 steps. This boy had already worked hard enough. Xie Qingcheng had only given He Yu the most basic kind of concern as his personal physician. How was that enough for this boy to put his life on the line and jump with him into a living hell? Xie Qingcheng's hand, which was covering He Yu's wound, trembled slightly. He had never felt much sorrow for He Yu before. At most, he'd felt a sense of responsibility, care, and pity. But at that moment, the young man's warm blood seemed to trickle along his skin, down his spine, to pierce his heart and stab deep into the marrow of his bones. That was right. They were merely a doctor and a patient, with a relationship of employment that couldn't be any more clear-cut. For Xie Qingcheng, because of a personal debt and the unique characteristics of psychological Ebola, he was supposed to pay special attention to He Yu. However, the same couldn't be said for He Yu. He Yu didn't owe him anything. When he looked at Xie Qingcheng, he shouldn't have had any emotions apart from those accorded to a doctor. Yet He Yu had still accompanied him to the library. Just because Xie Qingcheng had said, "I want to know the truth behind my parents' deaths." He desperately wanted to find the perpetrator, but that had nothing at all to do with He Yu. As Xie Qingcheng ran outside with He Yu in tow, keeping firm pressure on He Yu's injured shoulder, he said hoarsely, "I'll bring you to the hospital right away. Don't talk too much." He Yu was very quiet. Then, after a long moment of silence, the young man let out a soft laugh. "I'm fine, really. However, I wanted to ask you something, Dr. Xie." His breath puffed out right by Xie Qingcheng's ear. It was scorching hot, yet it seemed to carry a slight chill. "I really want to know, back then, why did you suddenly stop being a doctor? Was it really as simple as your contract coming to an end?" Xie Qingcheng was silent. "Why was it that no matter how I tried to keep you, you still rejected me?" Xie Qingcheng still didn't answer. "It's been 7 years, Xie Qingcheng. My dad told me that outside of employment, there's goodwill between people. Today, I really want to ask you." He Yu was still bleeding, but he didn't bother looking down. Instead, in the terrifyingly endless night, his black eyes only gazed unblinkingly at Xie Qingcheng. The look in his eyes was the same as the one from all those years ago, when that boy suddenly became childish in his helplessness, so childish that he tried to use his allowance to convince Xie Qingcheng to stay. No matter how high that boy's pain tolerance was, or how numb his mind was, after suffering these 2 gunshot wounds, he would still be hurt. He Yu's voice was very soft. Perhaps it was because they had run too fast, but it even sounded a bit hoarse. "Xie Qingcheng, back then, did you really not feel an ounce of extra compassion for me?" Well, that's the end of the chapter. We are on page 181 for chapter 43. Who would have thought that the truth would be like this? I'm not liking these chapter titles, because what does it mean? What do you mean? Xie Qingcheng stood silently with his back to the light. In the darkness of the night, He Yu couldn't decipher his expression. He only felt the hand supporting him tremble slightly. He Yu asked another question. "Xie Qingcheng, why did you have to leave?" Even in his current state, he could still remain calm. It was as though the more terrifying and critical the situation was, the less concerned he became. Xie Qingcheng didn't answer him. "You lied to me, didn't you? The reason you left wasn't just because your contract was up, right?" The look in that child's eyes. The look in this young man's eyes. Both were calm, childish, stubborn, but they also seemed indifferent. They gazed at him unflinchingly, digging deeper and deeper, but still unable to find the answer they sought. Xie Qingcheng abruptly felt that he couldn't face that persistent stare. He closed his eyes. "Let me get you out of here first." There wasn't much time left, so he redoubled his efforts and continued running toward the exit of the archives with He Yu in tow. When at last they ran out of the silent, unlit building into the noisy hubbub outside of whirling police lights and wailing sirens, it felt for a moment as if they had been dropped into a kaleidoscope. Zheng Jingfeng had also uncovered the true meaning behind the letter L at this point. With the location deduced, the red and blue flashing police lights descended on the target like the tide coming in from every direction at once. When Xie Qingcheng brought the still bleeding He Yu down the steps, half supporting, half carrying him, Zheng Jingfeng pulled his car door open with a bang and stepped out of the vehicle. This time, the Criminal Investigation Unit's captain's expression was frosty. Concern and anger shone from his panther-like eyes, the two contradictory emotions flitting over his face like a shadow play, their steely blades flashing brilliantly as they glanced off each other. "Xie Qingcheng. The archives are about to explode," said Xie Qingcheng as soon as he neared Zheng Jingfeng. "Don't let anyone else go in." Zheng Jingfeng looked like he very much wanted to grab the two of them by their necks and slap handcuffs on their wrists. But then he met Xie Qingcheng's eyes. They resembled Zhou Muying's eyes so much that he found himself looking away at the last moment, unable to maintain eye contact. There was blood on Xie Qingcheng's face. Zheng Jingfeng didn't know whose blood it was, but it made him feel incomparably guilty. It was a fact that he couldn't allow Xie Qingcheng to get too close to the case. Xie Qingcheng wasn't a police officer, and he didn't have the qualifications to be too deeply involved. Even if everything happening now was related to the unsolved case of his parents' deaths from 19 years ago, the only thing he could tell Xie Qingcheng was, "This is classified. You must hand the matter over to us." However, an individual was bound to be more flexible than an organization. The more regulated the organization, the more this held true. That was to say nothing of how there was likely a dirty cop amongst the police, or how these criminals seemed to be part of an international crime syndicate with an excellent grasp of cutting-edge technology. Although Xie Qingcheng had entrusted this case to them for 19 years, they still couldn't give him a satisfactory answer. Even when it came to this riddle involving the archives, all kinds of obstacles ensured that the police were still slower to get here than Xie Qingcheng. Zheng Jingfeng didn't have time to express his shock or ask any more questions. "Fall back immediately," he said into his two-way radio. "The archives are going to explode. Everyone, fall back." He then ushered Xie Qingcheng and He Yu into the police car and closed the door with a thunk. Everyone else in the car stared at Xie Qingcheng with a very strange look in their eyes. As Xie Qingcheng glanced at the broadcasting tower not too far in the distance, it seemed to have already returned to its usual, brightly lit appearance. That scarlet drop the hanky game of death video had disappeared, and in its place, a person's silhouette flickered across the tower. It might have been an advertisement. Xie Qingcheng didn't get a good look at it before the police car's engine rumbled to life. Why do I feel like it wasn't an advertisement, but something significant? By now, the main roads of the campus were nearly deserted. The police car sped off lightning fast with its flashing red and blue lights for a few hundred meters before, bang, a shuddering sound like muffled thunder came from behind them, followed closely by kaboom. An earth-shattering noise, accompanied by the shrieks of all the people who had witnessed the spectacle. Sure enough, the archives had exploded. Like a landslide, shards of brick and tile buried the past in an instant. Leaning back in the car, Xie Qingcheng would have only needed to look through the car's rear windows to see the roiling flames leaping into the air from the direction of the archives, like a swirling tempest, sweeping up crime and punishment in its wake, grinding them into dust, shattering them into ruined fragments that could never be reassembled. But Xie Qingcheng never looked back. Instead, he closed his eyes. The clues had all disintegrated. He couldn't look back. It was a long time before the deafening explosion subsided. Inside the car, it was very quiet, as everyone's attention was focused on the scene of the crime. After the car came to a stop, the police officers got out one by one. There was the rustling wind blowing outside, the crackling fire in the distance, and also, "Are you dissatisfied with something?" It was a man's voice. It was quite loud, as it came simultaneously from several of the cell phones in the car. "If you're dissatisfied with anything, you should take it up with the hospital." Xie Qingcheng paused and opened his eyes. Was he so shaken that he was hearing things? And his own voice at that? Don't argue with me here. No, he wasn't just hearing things. His eyes flew wide open as realization dawned. It was that video. The hackers had never stopped their video hijacking. The moment Xie Qingcheng recognized the video that was being projected onto the broadcasting tower, that's what I thought, as well as all the phones in the vicinity of Huzhou University, he immediately understood why those police officers had eyed him with such odd expressions. The video must have already been playing for a while. By the time He Yu and Xie Qingcheng had made it out of the building, the broadcasting tower had already been taken over by the scene. Xie Qingcheng's phone was still powered off, but when he turned it back on, it was immediately hijacked by the hacker's signal, and he received the video synced to the one that was playing out on the tower. It showed him from quite a few years ago. He was wearing the uniform of Huzhou First Hospital, a pure white coat with the hospital's pale blue crest stitched onto it, and a laminated name tag and 2 pens clipped to his chest. His surroundings were chaotic. He was encircled by the hospital's patients, who watched as he stood before the door of his unit facing a disheveled, unkempt woman. Xie Qingcheng knew immediately what this was, and when it had happened. But, his expression shifting subtly, he looked at He Yu. He Yu was frowning, not yet fully cognizant of what was going on. However, he had already realized that this video was the same one the hacker had wanted him to open before. The video he was supposed to watch to see if it was worth it. His shoulder was still bleeding. The doctor from the police unit who was administering first aid said to him, "I'm going to help you clean the wound and stop the bleeding, but it will hurt. Try to bear it." He Yu said indifferently, "Thank you." Pain, blood, even death, to him, they meant little. He was entirely focused on the tower and its ever-changing illumination. The scene was still playing out. The unkempt woman in the video was howling. "Why do you need me to show relevant ID? Why do you need the security guards to question me? Do you think it's easy for me to come see the doctor? It's so hard to register with your hospital's specialists. Scalpers have snatched up all the spots. I need to pay 500 yuan just to get an appointment. Why does it have to be like this?" And there's a footnote. Patients are assigned a number at registration that determines the order they're seen by the doctor. Scalpers will sometimes buy up these numbers to sell them off. That's a new way that the healthcare system can be messed up. All right. Okay. Also, I don't like where this is going, because I feel like it's going to influence my opinion of Xie Qingcheng. But we'll just see. Apparently, poor people don't just deserve to die. We also deserve to be shafted by you doctors and discriminated against. Is that right? Do you think I want to be filthy and reeking like this? As soon as I closed my stand at 4 in the morning, I came to wait in line outside the hospital for you to open. Do you think I have time to be all squeaky clean and neat like you? I'm really not a bad person. But that young Xie Qingcheng in the video stood with his hands in the pockets of his white coat, looking coldly at the sobbing woman who was hugging her knees in front of him. He said indifferently, "You come and sit in front of my consulting room even though you're not my patient. How do I know what you're planning to do after what happened with Yi Beihai?" Oh, right. After what happened with Yi Beihai, he's gonna be, like, really suspicious. But it's not... Oh, it's a really bad look. It's a really bad look. Because this is probably just, like, some poor woman who's not doing anything. "I just want to see a doctor," the woman cried. His face devoid of expression, Xie Qingcheng said, "You want to be treated, but I want to be safe. I'll have to trouble you not to sit in front of my consulting room. Go where you're supposed to go, whether that's internal medicine or neurosurgery. My unit isn't related to the registration number you have. But all the other waiting rooms are full, and I'm not allowed to sit on the floor. It was so hard for me to find this spot. I just want to rest for a bit. I've been standing all day." Save your breath for the security guards. I'm just a doctor who's taking a paycheck. I don't want to run the risk of dying in the line of duty. The patients standing around couldn't help but feel a surge of fury in their hearts. They originally had no intention of getting into a disagreement with the doctor, and were doing their best to restrain their anger. But when the woman burst into tears at Xie Qingcheng's harsh, aggressively overbearing manner of speaking, someone roared at him, "What are you doing? Do you not have a mother? Surely you're not going to condemn every patient because of one bad apple. Yi Beihai was an outlier. Someone as selfish as you can't compare to Mr. Qin Xian at all. Do you think you deserve to be a doctor?" Xie Qingcheng looked up, revealing a pair of peach blossom eyes that were incisive to the point of being cruel. "I'm a doctor regardless of your opinion. I don't think dying for the sake of a patient is worth it. And to be murdered by a lunatic would be a waste. Would be such a waste, it'd be laughable. Medicine is merely a profession. You shouldn't romanticize it with selfless sacrifice and guilt trip me like this." He enunciated his words clearly. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh God. This is where it gets personal for a certain person. He enunciated his words clearly. The life of a doctor will always be more valuable than the life of a lunatic who can't even control himself. Do you understand? For a moment, everyone fell silent. The video footage became a bit chaotic after that. In the rage of the mob, someone shoved the person who was doing the filming, causing the video to shake and become blurry. All that could be heard was the furious cursing of the patients. As the video got to that point, notifications from various group chats and direct messages started flooding the countless phones that were broadcasting the clip. All the phones in the car that weren't set to silent, including Xie Qingcheng's own, started buzzing incessantly. It seemed like the video had been swiftly spread to every corner of the internet. He Yu sat in the police car, allowing the medic to tend to the gunshot wounds on his shoulder. He'd had his forehead pressed against the window the whole time, quietly watching the video splashed across the broadcasting tower. It was the video that his hacker opponent had sent to him, the one he'd chosen not to play. Xie Qingcheng could feel his heart sinking. So this was it. In order to mess with He Yu, their opponents had chosen to reveal this video. Xie Qingcheng wished he could say something to He Yu, but he didn't know what he should say, or if there was even anything he could try to explain. He stopped watching the video. He knew very well what he'd said and done back then. The sins he couldn't explain, and the secrets he had to keep that were hidden within that video. At that very moment, they had all been spilled into the open for everyone to see. He didn't care. He had known when he did those things and said those words that he'd be crucified for it after the fact, that he'd face a lifetime of criticism, that everything had a price. He'd already been prepared to keep that secret for a lifetime. and he knew very well the kind of future he'd face if the video got out. But when his gaze landed on the still, quiet youth beside him, Yu's shoulder was still bleeding with no sign of stopping. The doctor had treated it with a tourniquet, but the sickly scent of blood still suffused this half-sealed police command car. Inexplicably, Xie Qingcheng thought back to a few hours ago, to the first time he looked at this youth as an equal. He Yu had extended his hand to him. At that time, no one was willing to help him. Even Chen Man had chosen to follow the rules. But He Yu had said, "I can help you." That outstretched hand was fine-boned, broad, clean, and beautiful. Even the nails were neatly trimmed. It was clear it belonged to a pampered young master who took good care of himself, free of blood, free of injury. There were only faint scars on his wrists, but those had already healed. "Why would you help me?" "Because you did the same for me once." "I've never, ever forgotten." The glaring crimson stung Xie Qingcheng's eyes, just as the images from that uninterruptible video cut their way into He Yu's field of vision. The scene projected on the broadcast tower changed again. It was now showing a conference room at the hospital. It seemed as if Xie Qingcheng had just given an outstanding academic talk, and the administration was in the middle of acknowledging his professional achievement. But his colleagues clapping in the audience weren't enthusiastic about the situation at all. It looked like this video was taken soon after his contentious encounter with that patient. The director thanked him. Xie Qingcheng stood up, and his gaze swept calmly over every single person below the stage. He didn't speak any words of gratitude. What he said was, "This will be the last time I give a talk at this hospital. I've decided to resign." No one spoke. A few brainless medical interns were still clapping robotically, but before they could get more than a couple of claps in, they came back to their senses. Their eyes widened in shock as they stared blankly at Xie Qingcheng, their mouths hanging open. Everyone else in the audience wore the same stunned expression. Xie Qingcheng was the youngest and most promising doctor at their facility. He was so formidable that he scarcely seemed human. Prior to his tenure, Huzhou First Hospital had never had an assistant director as young as him. Even if he had recently made some improper remarks, it wasn't anything so extreme that people wouldn't get over it eventually. After all, what doctor didn't get into a few conflicts with patients over the course of their career? But Xie Qingcheng said he was going to resign. The director's expression instantly stiffened. With a dry chuckle, he said, "Dr. Xie, why don't you sit down for now? We can discuss work matters after the conference is over." The head of medical affairs also forced a smile and took over the microphone. "Dr. Xie, you've probably been feeling upset lately. None of us can accept what happened to Professor Qin, and your unit was close to his, so you must have been close colleagues. You even witnessed Professor Qin's sacrifice firsthand, so we can understand how you feel." "I didn't know Qin Suyan very well," Xie Qingcheng said, cutting her off. "Nor am I feeling upset because of Professor Qin. I just don't want to be the next Qin Suyan." A few of Qin Suyan's students in the audience couldn't bear it anymore. "Xie Qingcheng, watch your mouth. What do you mean you don't want to be the next Qin Suyan? My teacher devoted his entire life to medicine. How dare you?" "But I don't." Silence fell. "Medicine is just a career to me. I will complete all my responsibilities with due care. But I don't think it's normal to give one's life in this line of work. Nor do I understand why so many of you here today feel so strongly about it to the point of finding it glorious. To the point where you would ignore your own safety to treat patients without following the proper procedures." See, you know, I know what's gonna happen. There's gonna be a situation and Xie Qingcheng is gonna, like, treat He Yu in some way and, like, risk himself by doing so. He's gonna do that. Professor Chin is worthy of respect, but what happened to him in the end was his own fault. Why did he elect to perform surgery on an unstable man's mother when the paperwork hadn't been properly filed? Chin Suyan's students shot to their feet. Xie Qingcheng, you... Forgive me, but I don't understand at all. The conference had become a scene of chaos. The grief and fury felt by the younger doctors couldn't be suppressed anymore. How dare you sneer like this? What do you mean it was his own fault? You think that Professor Chin's to blame for his own death? Xie Qingcheng, have you forgotten how you spoke of mentally ill patients in the past? You were the one who wholeheartedly supported letting them live in society, saying we should accept them and treat them as if they are ordinary people. How come that's changed? You got scared the moment there was an incident, didn't you? You saw with your own eyes how Professor Chin lost his life in the line of duty that day. And now you're afraid. You watched as he was thrown into a pool of blood, saw the red splattered all over his office, and you got scared, didn't you? You're afraid that it will happen to you one day. All the patients you interact with are mentally ill. You're in far more danger than him. If you're afraid, just say it. No one will make fun of you, but stop cheapening Professor Chin's sacrifice. Yes, I am afraid, Xie Qingcheng replied coolly. The young doctor gnashed their teeth. And yet you have the guts to talk about not discriminating against the mentally ill. Tell me, how do you talk to cancer patients? Do you tell them, oh, my condolences, you're about to die soon? There wasn't the slightest hint of expression on Xie Qingcheng's face. His features were colder than hoarfrost. I'm sure you don't. The truth is one thing, and the words we say are another. As a doctor in mental health, I need to give my patients hope and encouragement. I need to let them feel as if they're being treated like normal people. But ask yourself, everyone, do any of you truly feel no apprehension at all toward mentally ill patients who are identified as dangerous? Which one of you would willingly interact with them alone and go so far as to hand your life over to such patients without the slightest reservations? Could any of you do it? So, everything you said was nothing more than superficial platitudes. You're just a despicable fake putting on hypocritical airs. Xie Qingcheng didn't argue with the people who had lost their tempers. Just as always, he was extremely calm, so calm he almost seemed callous. So callous, he almost seemed cold-blooded. Qin Suyan might have been a saint, but I'm nothing more than an ordinary person. When I come to work and put on these clothes, I'm a doctor who's treating his patients. When I leave work and take these clothes off, I have a family. I have a wife and a little sister to take care of. I haven't reached Qin Suyan's level of enlightenment. No one spoke. Henry, I see now why Meatbun made up a fictional psychological condition to make her point. No, I think that makes sense to me. I'm curious, like, your specific reasoning why you're like, oh, that's why she did it, but I think I see what you're saying. Because it's like, you can make this point about a condition that doesn't exist, and it comes off a little better, or like, are you saying something different? If you want to become Qin Suyan, then go ahead, Xie Qingcheng said, removing the medal which he'd just received and putting it back into its velvet-lined brocade box. His gaze was extremely sober and exceedingly calm. I just want to be an ordinary person. At this point, the video suddenly flashed and abruptly flickered and faded to nothing. Now that the countdown on the WZL death game had concluded, the police couldn't allow the perpetrators to continue their outrageous behavior. They had gained the ability to reclaim control over the information transmission channels a little while before, but they didn't dare to act rashly on the chance that it would precipitate a terror attack on Huzhou's innocent citizens, so they could only let their opponents do as they wished. But now, there was no way the police could allow the video to continue playing. With an order from the top, the Bloody Sword broadcasting tower that had bustled with activity for the whole night seemed to wake up from its demonic possession at last, as its central power supply was cut off. A bang rang out with the massive power outage. Like curtains lowering over a stage at the end of a play, the entire broadcasting tower went dark as all its light vanished in an instant. Like a giant beast that had been tranquilized in the middle of the school's campus after spending the night going berserk, it had returned to being utterly, deathly still, without any signs of life. Behind the broadcasting tower, the conflagration was still raging, its soaring flames dyeing the night sky over the archive's crimson. Police officers surrounded the area around that centuries-old building, blazing away. Someone had dialed the 119 emergency dispatch line. Every corner of the campus was in an uproar. No one was sleeping tonight. Oh, Henry, I see your point. You can't make a blanket statement like that about any real personality disorder. But the guy, what's his name, who killed the doctor, he didn't have psychological Ebola, right? So I feel like it still kind of sounds like a statement against just some kind of whatever mental illness that he had, like whatever nebulous mental illness, but like it still feels like a statement against or like about a real thing and not really about psychological Ebola. So I don't know. But I mean, it's interesting because it's like, obviously, like, doctors are people and they're scared. And if a patient, like, could be considered dangerous, then it's like, oh, that's scary. That's like a real thing. It's just, he dealt with that in like the worst way possible. But it's also like, okay, that's real. Yeah, like doctors, they can't be expected to like sacrifice themselves and meet like superhuman expectations. Totally. Okay, no, that makes sense. No, yeah, don't worry about it. You are making sense. Like in a world where there is psychological Ebola, it like even more apparent. Yeah. But inside the car, it was deathly silent. The video was gone. The scene was over. But Hoyu's eyes, which had been fixed on the broadcasting tower this whole time, were still gazing at that completely darkened building. He hadn't moved a muscle, extraordinarily serene to the point of being a little frightening. And here's a bunch of quotes in italics, so I think Hoyu is like remembering them. The vast majority of mental illnesses are normal people's responses to abnormal circumstances. Social inequality, abnormal environments. The main culprits dealing the greatest damage to their psyches, very ironically, nearly all originate from their families, from their workplaces, from society. They originate from us. But you, sooner or later, you'll have to depend on yourself to walk out of the shadows in your heart. You need to rebuild the bridges that link you with other people in society. I wish you an early recovery. Hey, little devil. Doesn't that hurt? Doesn't it hurt? Silence. At this moment, the words that Xie Qingcheng had said back then, the words that pried open the shackles in Hoyu's heart, the encouragement that convinced Hoyu to grudgingly view Xie Qingcheng as different from the others, the comfort that Xie Qingcheng once gave Hoyu when he had been going through his most difficult times, they all seemed to float up like a cloud of dust, rendered indescribably ridiculous and cold. Hoyu looked at the tower. His eyes were just as terrifyingly black as that unlit building. Counting the days, it couldn't have been more than a month after this video was filmed that Xie Qingcheng resigned from his post as his personal physician and then disappeared without a trace. It was as though Xie Qingcheng had been escaping from the lair of a predatory beast, or perhaps fleeing from someone with a contagious disease. As the medic cleaned the wound in Hoyu's arm, it suddenly seemed to throb with agonizing pain. Otherwise, why would he feel cold all over? And why would he have gone so pale? Hoyu. Hoyu didn't answer. I meant... Hoyu heard Xie Qingcheng's voice from beside him. Patiently, he waited for Xie Qingcheng to finish his sentence. 1 second passed, then another. But Xie Qingcheng did not continue. He really had said all those things. No matter what the reason was, no matter his goal or the secrets hidden within his words, they had all come out of his own mouth. In the wake of Qin Xian's murder, it was true that He Yu was the one Xie Qingcheng had sacrificed. The truth was that he didn't have any excuses to explain himself to this young man. He Yu suddenly felt ridiculous. He disliked doctors to begin with, and he had disliked Xie Qingcheng in particular from the start. How had this man earned his trust and persuaded him to open the gates of his heart to him? Hadn't it been precisely because of the so-called equal treatment? Because Xie Qingcheng had viewed him as someone who was part of regular society, supporting him as he walked out of his dark dragon's lair and ventured into the boundless sunlight outside? But after Qin Xian's murder, and before leaving his post, what had Xie Qingcheng said when He Yu wasn't around, in places he didn't even know of? He Yu slowly closed his eyes. He felt like someone had backhanded him viciously across the cheek. That slap had traveled through many long, heavy years before coming to land on his face, so it should have lost its momentum. He Yu didn't think that he could possibly feel any emotional disturbance from this slap. But he still felt a faint, stinging pain in his flesh. "All right. I've bandaged your wounds for the time being," said the police medic who'd been overseeing He Yu's treatment. "I'll have someone take you to the hospital. You still need to get this looked at as soon as possible. Come with me to the other car." There was no response from He Yu. "Hello?" the medic prompted. He Yu opened his eyes. He was too calm. So calm he seemed a bit terrifying. Phone calls were furiously pouring in one after another on Xie Qingcheng's phone, whether out of care, concern, or a desire for confirmation. The callers had various motives. Xie Qingcheng didn't pick up. He just stared at He Yu's profile. In a gentle, refined tone, He Yu said to the police medic, "Thank you for going to such trouble." Then, with one long-legged stride, I've got a drink, 'cause long legs. With one long-legged stride, he got out of the car. He took a few steps forward. It wasn't until this moment, when he was about to leave, that he was finally willing to stop and turn his head slightly to the side. The flashing red and blue police beacons illuminated his unblemished face with a steadily flickering border of light. He smiled softly, firelight flaring through his dark eyes. "Dr. Xie, who would have thought that the truth would be like this?" Oh, there's art. Okay, why are you showing me this? Hold on, we're not looking at that yet. Xie Qingcheng didn't say a word. "It must have been such a sacrifice on your part to pretend for so many years. You've really worked hard." It's truly too ironic, He Yu thought. All these years, the one thing he feared the most was being treated like he was different from the rest. It was Xie Qingcheng who had walked into his lonely lair and bestowed upon him a beautiful set of convictions, giving him a layer of armor to carry through life for the first time, and allowing him to believe that someday he could find a bridge he could cross to the rest of society. He had believed in Xie Qingcheng so firmly. No matter how much He Yu disliked him, no matter how clearly Xie Qingcheng drew the lines between them, no matter how callously Xie Qingcheng had left back then, He Yu still understood his reasons, and he'd clung to those words of encouragement like a fool. Wearing the armor Xie Qingcheng had given him, he'd soldiered on with the stubborn attachment for so long. But as it turned out, the inside of that armor was lined with thorns. He Yu had thought that it could fend off the mockery flung at him from the outside world. But in the moment when he least expected it, hundreds of thorns and thousands of blades had been released from the inside, piercing through him from head to toe. The articles of faith that Xie Qingcheng had given him were false. Even he had lied to him. "Xie Qingcheng, if you really were so scared of me, you could have told me directly, right from the beginning. You didn't need to put on an act. And you especially didn't need to tell me so many great principles against your own beliefs. At least that wouldn't have been so..." He Yu trailed off, leaving his sentence unfinished. His silhouette looked terribly lonely. But his voice was still exceedingly calm, just the way Xie Qingcheng had once hoped for him, just like Xie Qingcheng had once taught him to strive for. The epitome of calm. In the end, He Yu only chuckled. The blood he'd lost was still on Xie Qingcheng's hands, but his mocking laughter had already floated into the wind. Then he turned around completely and followed the police officers toward the other car without so much as a backward glance. Well, here's the art, everybody. There's a lot of detail in the cracks. I see like a cake, like a birthday cake. There's a clock. I don't know, I guess it's like some of his memories with Xie Qingcheng. Yeah. So that's the end of the chapter. And it's time for the break. When we come back, we just have, like, one more chapter for the day. These chapters were, like, a little bit on the longer side. So, I just want to say Meat Bun really does it with the chapter titles. And this chapter title coming up for chapter 44 is, like, one of the most, like, ominous sounding because it's just one word. Chapter 44 is just called Once. Just once. Like, whatever that means. Once. Okay. So I'll be back for once. Hi, hello, I'm back. We're back for more pain. Back for more pain and who knows what in this chapter on page 201, chapter 44, titled Once. Well, let's... all I can do is start. I don't know why this chapter title has me, like, so scared. It was as if that 13-year-old boy had once again appeared before his eyes, gazing at him, obstinate and helpless, as he silently restrained his feelings with all his might. The day Xie Qingcheng left the He family, he felt he saw something precious in that youth's eyes, something that didn't just belong to a patient. But his heart was too hardened, and he wasn't very sensitive to certain emotions in the first place. Besides, he had been caught up in so many other things at the time and hadn't been inclined to consider a child's feelings very carefully. Thus, he had instinctively doubted that those eyes contained emotions that transcended a doctor-patient relationship. He'd had to leave. He Yu was indeed someone he had sacrificed, someone he had abandoned. Amidst the chaotic aftermath of Qin Suyan's murder, He Yu was the child that Xie Qingcheng had steeled his heart to leave behind. Once, when that child had been dragged into a whirlpool by the undertow of his illness, he had looked at Xie Qingcheng with the same unwavering gaze. The look in He Yu's eyes was like that of a fledgling dragon who had held out its little claw to humans and trusted them, only to end up being deceived. Its wings were broken, its spine torn out, and its talons snapped. Injured, it lay on the rock in a daze, its little wings and claws caked with blood. But it was a dragon. In order not to lose face, it didn't dare to wail too loudly. He Yu was a prideful person, so he had said with as much self-control as he could muster, "Xie Qingcheng, in these past few years, I've gone through many doctors. They had me take medicine, gave me shots, and looked at me with an expression that said that I was a singular, unique patient. You were the only one who was different. You were the only one who treated me like someone who should integrate into society. You told me that taking medicine and getting shots weren't the most important things, and that the most crucial step was to make connections with others and build up a strong sense of self. That's the only way I can keep holding on. Xie Qingcheng, we're not very close, but I still..." Xie Qingcheng had said nothing when He Yu trailed off. I thought you saw me as a normal person with feelings, not just as a patient." Despite his prideful heart, He Yu had still been forced to say something so childish in the end. "I have a lot of allowance. I can hire you. I can keep you here. Could you please not leave? Could you please stay with me?" At that time, Xie Qingcheng had thought that He Yu's intense unwillingness to let him go was perhaps wholly due to Xie Shui. Perhaps even He Yu himself had thought the same. But in reality, it wasn't. When Xie Qingcheng closed his eyes and thought back to that period of time, he remembered how he would sling a much younger He Yu over his shoulder when he refused to receive his shots or take his medicine. How He Yu's scrambling hands would obediently relax. How he could almost feel the weight of the boy calmly going limp against his shoulder. Dr. Xie Qingcheng. That voice transformed from soft and immature to raspy as He Yu entered adolescence. Even later, it held a sorrow that was forcibly covered up with stubbornness and indifference. Xie Qingcheng, you might not be mentally ill, but you're even more heartless than me. You're heartless. My illness hasn't gotten better yet. It's still severe, so why did you abandon me? Bang! That ear-splitting gunshot, the blood that spurted out and spilled over his palm, that young man's coldly penetrating almond eyes in the darkness. Dr. Xie, who would have thought that the truth would be like this? Pretend for so many years. You've really worked hard. When an abandoned, injured fledgling dragon gazed at the human who had trodden its innocence and enthusiasm underfoot, would it have an expression like this? The warm weight on Xie Qingcheng's shoulders seemed to fade away. He closed his eyes. The only heat that remained now was in the place where He Yu's blood had splashed onto his palm. Suddenly, someone spoke up from behind him. You must be very tired. The weight on Xie Qingcheng's shoulders returned as a hand pressed against that exact same spot. He opened his eyes. He was in the police station. The person pressing a hand against his shoulder was Zheng Jingfeng. Amidst the chaos and hubbub, Xie Qingcheng had been lost in his memories of his past with He Yu. It was already very late now. Xie Qingcheng was sitting in an interrogation room across from a young policeman who had already spent more than an hour recording his testimony. After greeting Zheng Jingfeng, the junior officer tidied up his files and left. Xie Qingcheng wasn't Zheng Jingfeng's relative, but Zheng Jingfeng had been especially close to his parents, so he had recused himself from the investigation and only entered the interrogation room now. Want to smoke? Zheng Jingfeng tentatively struck up a conversation with Xie Qingcheng. Yes, please, Xie Qingcheng replied wearily. Zheng Jingfeng passed him a cigarette and sat down opposite him. After lighting the cigarette, Xie Qingcheng bit down on the filter and slid the lighter back across the table. As he took a drag, he slowly raised his exhausted eyes. Zheng Jingfeng met them. Even though he knew the man before him quite well, Zheng Jingfeng still found himself slightly unsettled by Xie Qingcheng's gaze at that moment. It was too unyielding, too sharp, like a dagger or a boulder, like the eyes of his deceased mother and father. Or perhaps it was even more unnerving. Because when Zheng Jingfeng looked at Xie Qingcheng now, after everything that happened tonight, those eyes didn't hold much vulnerability at all. He only looked tired. The hand that Zheng Jingfeng was using to light his cigarette trembled involuntarily. Why aren't you saying anything? Xie Qingcheng's voice was slightly raspy, which at least made him seem a little more like a normal person. You didn't come in just to sit there. Because I don't feel like saying what I ought to say. You knew the risks, yet you still insisted on doing what you did. Zheng Jingfeng heaved a sigh. Plus, whether you believe it or not, I was thinking about how to comfort you the whole time before I came in. But now that I'm here, I realized that it's not really necessary. Lao Zheng looked at Xie Qingcheng's practically expressionless face. Saying that it's not necessary to comfort him, and it's like, no, that's just what his face looks like. That doesn't mean that he doesn't need to be comforted. Xie Qingcheng dragged the ashtray toward himself. Then he plucked the cigarette from his chapped lips and tapped off the ash. Indeed, it's not necessary. But you know, looking at you right now, there are a few things I can't help thinking about. Like what? Zheng Jingfeng sighed deeply. I'm reminded of when you were little. Xie Qingcheng said nothing. When I first met you, You were still in elementary school. Your mom had caught a cold that day, so you decided to come to the cafeteria all on your own to get her food. Zheng Jingfeng's steely eyes misted over with softness at his reminiscence. Your mom loved egg drop soup with tomato. You weren't very tall back then, so you couldn't reach the ladle when you stood next to that big pot of soup. When I saw you, I went over to help. When you looked up to thank me, there was no need for an introduction. I knew right away, the moment I saw your eyes, that you were Zhou Muying and Xie Ping's kid. After that, you'd often come to the bureau to do your homework. When you were tired, you'd drape your mom or dad's jacket over your shoulders and take a nap at the table while you waited for them to finish their work. I've met a lot of the kids from our unit, but you were the quietest and most mature of them all. Zheng Jingfeng exhaled a ring of smoke and tilted his head back, following it with his eyes. Later on, I couldn't help but be curious. I asked your dad, how did you teach your kid to be so well behaved? He laughed and said to me that no one told you what to do. That was just your personality. I didn't believe him. I just thought Lao Xie was showing off, so I ran over to ask you. I don't know if you still remember, but back then I asked you how you were so impressive. You showed me your prize from a martial arts competition that you had just won that day, the old captain said, and then you told me you wanted to be a police officer. At the same time, Xie Qingcheng said, I wanted to be a police officer. I take it that's what he wanted until his parents died, and he was like, they sacrificed themselves for their job, and he maybe realized he didn't want to do that. The two of them fell into silence. After a while, Zheng Jingfeng said, at that age, most children only have vague ideas when you ask them about their dreams for the future. But not you. As soon as I saw the light in your eyes, I knew that you were serious. You were probably sure about it since you were little, so you always lived more solemnly than other kids your age because of that concrete goal. Xie Qingcheng finished smoking his cigarette and lit another one. Zheng Jingfeng said, you shouldn't smoke so much. It's fine. You can continue. Zheng Jingfeng sighed. But no matter how calm and cool-headed you were back then, you still seemed like a normal person. When I look at you now, really, I'm worried about you. An ordinary person wouldn't be able to bottle up their emotions so tightly. It'd drive them crazy. Xiaoxie, there's really no need for you to be so tense. I don't feel tense, nor do I feel tired, Xie Qingcheng said. You don't have to come up with weaknesses for me. I'm already very used to my current state. Weakness is for women. It's not a problem I have. That annoyed Zheng Jingfeng so much, his head began to hurt. He pointed at him. That's such a sexist way of thinking. You really ought to fix that. It's a good thing the female colleagues in our unit aren't here. If they were, no matter how handsome you are, they'd all roll their eyes at you, and I dare say you'd deserve it. More power to them. What kind of outdated nonsense are you spouting? These kinds of things didn't matter to Xie Qingcheng. He fiddled with the cigarette's filter paper. Enough small talk, Captain Zheng. Let's get to the more important matters at hand. What exactly are you saying isn't important? Zheng Jingfeng glared at him. Let me ask you this. Is your life unimportant? Are those outrageous videos that were projected onto the broadcasting tower unimportant? You haven't checked your phone. They're having a real field day online. You sure are something, Xie Qingcheng, to have pissed off that criminal organization so badly that they went out of their way to stream your video free of charge. You tell me, does that count as important? Also, you and your little friend were both inside the archives when it was about to explode. Yes, I believe that things happened the way you two described, but do you really expect the people further up the chain of command to accept it? Do you really think things work that way? You'll need to be questioned, and so will your little friend. Does that count as important? And another thing, How are his injuries? Xie Qingcheng interrupted Captain Zheng's torrential tirade. Lao Zheng started in surprise. Since he'd entered the room, this was the first question Xie Qingcheng had asked that sounded slightly human. Xie Qingcheng felt guilty about He Yu. He very rarely entertained feelings of guilt over anyone, much less someone significantly younger than him. To put it harshly, there were times when Xie Qingcheng looked at these youngsters and felt as though they didn't seem all that much like living, breathing creatures. That wasn't to say that he didn't treat them like human beings. Rather, he simply didn't attach much importance to how they felt about him. He Yu was no exception. Even though Xie Qingcheng had interacted with him for so many years, from when He Yu was 7 until he turned 14, Xie Qingcheng had been the He Yu's family. He Yu, I can't speak today, been the He family's personal physician. He had never placed He Yu on the same level as himself, nor had he ever considered him someone he could speak to casually or treat as an equal. He had always told He Yu what to do, and apart from unilaterally giving instructions, he had never sought to obtain anything from He Yu. More importantly, he'd never thought that there was anything he could possibly get from such a youth. Now Xie Qingcheng had realized for the first time that He Yu had already grown up, that he possessed emotions and personal desires that he couldn't disregard. He thought back to the glacial expression that had filled He Yu's eyes before he left. Then he looked down at the dried blood on his body once more. For the first time, he clearly felt toward He Yu the stirrings of emotions that exceeded the limits of what he would ordinarily feel for a patient. He asked again, "Captain Zheng, how is he doing?" "Your little friend must have taken the wrong medicine today." Zheng Jingfeng shook his head. "He's not even related to you, and he followed you into the archives anyway? And you, how could you allow him to join in on your nonsense and do something so dangerous?" Xie Qingcheng lowered his eyes in silence. At the time, his mind really had been muddled, his sense of awareness obliterated, and his whole being torn asunder by 19 years of agony. When he and He Yu had gone to the archives, his only thought had been that perhaps he would be able to finally get some kind of answer about the organization that had killed his parents. He had utterly failed to consider the reality that his actions were far too risky. It was only when Lu Yuju pulled out a gun that he'd abruptly come to his senses. But by then, it was already too late. You should be glad that Lu Yuju didn't know how to use a gun, or the two of you would have died right there inside that building. And even if you lived, if he died, how could you possibly face his parents? Zheng Jingfeng raked his fingers through his hair, deeply vexed. Speaking of which, he's He Jiwei's son. You've got some fucking nerve, using He Jiwei's son for your own purposes. His parents called our higher-ups, asking what in the world was going on. Thank God he only got shot in the arm and didn't manage to break anything. Otherwise, I'd... He jabbed his finger at Xie Qingcheng sharply several times. "I'd like to see how you deal with the consequences." Xie Qingcheng closed his eyes. He Jiwei had called him a number of times, but he hadn't figured out what he could possibly say to the man, so he hadn't answered. Later on, He Jiwei sent him a message asking, "Why did He Yu do something like this with you?" Xie Qingcheng didn't know either. Perhaps it was because He Yu really had thought highly of his philosophy once. Perhaps 7 years of companionship had led He Yu to think that their relationship amounted to more than the flimsy connection between a doctor and his patient. But now that those videos had been played, the original answer no longer mattered. As he left, He Yu's gaze had been cold as the first time they'd met, or perhaps even icier, as if he were looking at a fraud. After careful thought, Xie Qingcheng realized that no matter how much He Yu said he disliked him, he had never shown him that sort of expression before. He had never shown anyone that kind of expression before. Even during the flare-ups of his illness when he was mad and bloodthirsty, vicious and merciless. He had vented all of it onto himself. All the harm he enacted was self-directed. Xie Qingcheng was the first person he had torn into with that frightful gaze. All right, all right. Your little friend isn't in any serious danger now, so don't overthink it. Zhang Jingfeng had misunderstood Xie Qingcheng's silence. He folded his hands on the table and softened his voice a bit. Just like you, he'll need to undergo all the necessary procedures and investigations. We'll explain everything to his parents, but as for whether you should follow up and offer them your own apologies, you can figure it out yourself. Xie Qingcheng felt agitated. He had already finished his second cigarette. He reached for a third, but Zhang Jingfeng put a hand over the box. Are you trying to destroy your lungs or what? You smoke and you smoke and you smoke. Who smokes like that, huh? I thought you couldn't stand other people smoking when you were younger. What happened to you? I'm irritated. Even if you're irritated, you can't smoke like this. Xie Qingcheng said nothing. I know that you're fucking irritated today. My head hurts like hell, too. My grandson's in the hospital with the 39-degree fever, and I haven't even had time to call him back yet. Zhang Jingfeng rapped his knuckles against the table. So deal with it. Wait till I finish talking. Xie Qingcheng sighed. Fine. Talk. I was listening to your testimony in the surveillance room just now, and I believe everything you said. But I'm telling you. Here Zhang Jingfeng's gaze became a bit evasive, and for some reason, his forceful voice began to soften. Don't get your hopes up. My guess is that Lu Yuju's death was planned for a long time, and she was the person the organization set up to take the fall. They even left behind a trail of clues that directly implicates her in tonight's murders. All the necessary documentation will line up accordingly, fulfilling the conditions to close the case. This whole thing got too big, and you know that the bigger the incident, the more it demands a quick explanation. The policemen on the ground aren't idiots. They know there are massive gaps in the details, but some of the higher-ups can't handle too much pressure, and they might not look too deeply into whether everything stands up under close scrutiny. They may even be eager to wrap things up immediately. Barred from smoking, Xie Qingcheng fiddled with the lighter instead, flicking the switch again and again. And they have protection amongst the higher-ups, don't they? He said, lifting his blade-like gaze to pierce the man across from him. We don't know who it is or how broad their reach is, but seeing as they dared to do something like this, there's no doubt that they have someone backing them, Zhang Jingfeng replied. Then, before Xie Qingcheng could say a word, he added, Don't ask me. Fuck if I know. True, I shouldn't ask you. Xie Qingcheng leaned back in his chair. This was the police department. What could Zhang Jingfeng possibly say? And if he knew who the protection was, would he really just be sitting here like this? Actually, the objectives of their operation tonight are also very clear, said Zhang Jingfeng. First, to clean up any traces left in the archives. Second, the reason they made such a racket was because they discovered the existence of people like Zhang Yong, people with weak personalities and shaky ties to the organization who might turn to the authorities. Tonight's broadcasting tower death game was a warning for all Zhang Yongs, letting them know that even if they're tailed and protected by the authorities, the organization can still kill them right under the police's noses. They're putting all their collaborators and underlings in their place. He went on. Third, they wanted to wrap up the Cheng Kong incident. They sent Lu Yuju out on a suicide mission, and they might send other scapegoats out in the future. They're taking advantage of those among us who'd rather minimize the impact of the case and rush to close it as quickly as possible. Even if there are police officers who want to investigate this further in the future, they would be acting alone, with their own meager abilities. And I'm not discounting the possibility that there's a huge mole in the force. Zhang Jingfeng's eyes fell on Xie Qingcheng. But what I don't understand is the last part. Xie Qingcheng already knew what Zhang Jingfeng was talking about, But he still asked, "What do you mean? Why would they play those videos of you at the end?" It was likely because they had discovered that the people attempting to stop Lu Yuju were Xie Qingcheng and He Yu. All they would have had to do to come to this conclusion was steal a portion of the school's security footage. But the fact that they had used this method to stop He Yu from helping Xie Qingcheng meant the organization already knew that He Yu was mentally ill, and that Xie Qingcheng had once been his personal physician. This information wasn't widely known. Zheng Jingfeng didn't know about it, not even Xie Shui did. In all the years that Xie Qingcheng had been employed by the He family, he had always told others that the work he did was related to a project for He Jiwei's pharmaceutical company. With that in mind, Xie Qingcheng had even suspected He Jiwei for a split second. But it was really a rather absurd idea. Well, I guess you should have been suspecting the mother, although I don't know if the father is involved as well. Well, and I lost my place. He Jiwei was He Yu's father, and he had once helped Xie Qingcheng a great deal. He wouldn't do such a thing. Besides, he realized, the secret of He Yu's mental illness wasn't ironclad. The He family had plenty of servants who all knew a thing or two. With so many people in their home, something was bound to slip out. That made it extremely difficult to use this fact to narrow down the suspects to a certain group of people. To say nothing of how these criminal masterminds had a hacker who had the ability to go through various online databases as if they were unguarded and treat confidential data like freebies open for the taking. Zheng Jingfeng scratched his head in irritation as he saw Xie Qingcheng spacing out. "I'm asking you a question, Xiao Xie." "I'm not sure." Even now, Xie Qingcheng did not tell Zheng Jingfeng about He Yu's condition. They probably realized that I was trying to stop Lu Yuju and wanted to teach me a lesson. Zheng Jingfeng stared at him in mild disbelief. Likewise, Xie Qingcheng gazed back at Lao Zheng without blinking. At last, Zheng Jingfeng sighed. "That's just great. In that case, they've achieved their goal." He pushed his own phone toward Xie Qingcheng. "Take a look for yourself." The internet had already exploded with discussion. For one thing, Xie Qingcheng's words were absolutely callous and improper, and poked at many people's sore spots, and they'd even involved the esteemed Professor Qin Suyan. For another, this criminal organization had gone to the trouble of broadcasting an old video of Xie Qingcheng after completing their Drop the Hanky death game. Although the video had circulated through the internet at one point, not many people had watched it. After all these years, it hadn't even reached a couple hundred views. It was very unlikely that the organization played it just because they thought Xie Qingcheng was handsome. No one could possibly know that this video had been selected specifically to drive a wedge between Xie Qingcheng and He Yu, the hacker who had been with him at the time, so everyone had begun to speculate whether Xie Qingcheng was somehow linked to the mastermind of this terrorist attack. All sorts of opinions had popped up very quickly. Xie Qingcheng, a plain, ordinary former doctor and current Huzhou Medical School professor, had actually become a trending topic. Like what you see, Zheng Jingfeng felt both helpless and aggrieved that Xie Qingcheng wouldn't listen to his advice. With his emotions in a jumble, Zheng Jingfeng's words sounded a little like a scolding a father would give his child. At this moment, one of Zheng Jingfeng's subordinates called for him from outside, so he got up, patted Xie Qingcheng's shoulder, and sighed. "How impressive. Even the celebrities aren't as handsome as you. It's just that you have such an unpleasant mouth. Did you take the wrong medicine that day? I can't believe you'd say something like that. What was up with you?" "Nothing." "What do you mean, nothing? Was that even you? How could I not fucking know you? If you don't explain everything as soon as possible, just wait and see what happens. The public's opinion has already..." "Do you think you know me very well, Officer Zheng?" Xie Qingcheng stared at him. "Those were all my true feelings. True feelings my ass. I've known you and your parents for 40 years if you add both generations together. How could I not know you? Zheng Jingfeng's tone softened once more when he met Xie Qingcheng's eyes. Forget it. If you don't want to talk about it, then just forget it. I won't force you, and in any case, no one can stop you from doing whatever you want, even if you end up beaten to a bloody pulp. I give up, okay? Xie Qingcheng remained silent. Take care and rest up. Once you've recovered, go see that little friend of yours. It was quite evident that this was something Zheng Jingfeng only chose to tell him at the last minute. For some reason, he's been burning up with a high fever, even though the wound was treated in time so it wouldn't get infected. Ooh, now you tell us. Okay. Xie Qingcheng looked up, his hands imperceptibly balling into fists. An unexplainable high fever was one of He Yu's symptoms when his psychological Ebola flared up. Then he... But I don't know if he'd want to see you. He seemed to be in a pretty bad mood. He didn't say much beyond answering the necessary questions. Zheng Jingfeng sighed. He's already gone to the hospital. You can contact him yourself later. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Oh, great. Okay. That's it. That's all. So, that's where we stop for today. Yeah. So, when we come back on Monday, we will be on page 217 for chapter 45, which is called He Didn't Care Whether He Lived or Died. Gotta wait till Monday for that. So, we're, I guess we're in what you'd call the breakup period right now. Like, if you can even call it that. Well, that was a doozy. But also, okay, here's my line of thought right now, as I try not to think too hard about the emotional beats that just happened. But the organization has something to do with the death of Xie Qingcheng's parents. And Lu, what's her name? Lu something. Sorry, I'm forgetting her name right now. But Executive Liu, He Yu's mother, is part of the organization. So an organization that one of He Yu's parents is in had something to do with the death of Xie Qingcheng's parents. So, like, I don't know, that's just like supremely fucked up. And I've just been thinking about that, and I'm just like, okay. And yeah. So that's a lot. It's that's all been a lot. And it's also the fact that the organization, like, I don't know, they killed his parents, and they've been monitoring and, like, holding on to this video of Xie Qingcheng that they then showed. They know about Xie Qingcheng. They know about He Yu having psychological Ebola. There's so many implications, and I'm scared. So I said it wrong because I'm trying to pronounce it right. It's Lu, but with the umlaut over the U, and I have trouble with that one. It's like no, I can't even do it right. Sometimes I can get it and sometimes I can't. But I feel like you would know, because isn't that like a sound in German as well, Henry? Oh, kind of like the word new. Oh yeah, no, it's just I gotcha. Yeah, it's the same sound. Yeah, I was like super thrown off when I learned the Chinese had that sound. I was like, wait, what? Here? But I try. So, So yeah, I don't even know. My head, no thoughts, head full, or many thoughts, but they're not going anywhere. They're like, I have no conclusions. I'm just like, this means something bad. I don't know what it is. But I will I'll see y'all on Monday. Thank you for coming to the stream. Bye.